Welcome. I'm Maria Carpenter. I'm from the Northeastern University Libraries. We are delighted to have Juliana Hatfield here today. Let's hear it for Juliana. I want to thank our co-sponsors, the Northeastern Bookstore and the Department of Music. Our Meet the Author series is a really important series. We love to contribute to the intellectual dialogue of ideas and artists on campus and off campus. This season has been a really robust season for us. We've had over 20 authors just from the fall through the new year, so we're so glad to be able to have this growing program. And I just wanted to also thank the members of the library's Programming and Communications Committee for putting together these fabulous events. Juliana Hatfield, she's a local. She's a Cambridgian, and she grew up in Duxbury, which is really nice. Juliana had a short stint at BU before she transferred to Berkeley, where she and some friends formed Blake Babies. She released her first solo album, Hey Babe, in 1992, and achieved major popularity with her release of Become What You Are in 1993. Juliana has been considered a role model for women and teen girls by the way she addresses females in her songs and interviews. Her most recent album was released in 2008, How to Walk Away, on her own label, Ye Old Records. In addition to writing her book and 18 solo albums, Juliana has a blog, so you should check it out. Thanks. Juliana, welcome.
Thank you. So, do you want to do this?
Let's see if this works. I think it will.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you all for coming. First of all, I have to say I know that there was supposed to be a performance today, but unfortunately I'm under doctor's orders not to sing for a little while because I found a thing on my throat. I've been recording a new album, and I guess I've been overexerting myself vocally. So I'm really sorry about that. But I'll just be reading from my book and then answering questions and signing things. So yeah, I've been basically making a living at music for about 20 years, and I wrote this book, which is the story of my life in music. Kind of tells about my background and my inspirations, and then it also interspersed with that. It also talks about there's also a diary of a tour from a few years ago. So I'm going to read a few things. The first thing is from a chapter called The Harpsichord, and it's really about my father and my mother, who were both amateur piano players. And my mother, at one time, my mother actually wanted to be a concert pianist, but she gave up that dream. I never dreamed of finding Prince Charming and living happily ever after. I never dreamed of getting married, never believed a man would save me from anything or make my life any better. I never had any faith in romantic love. I put it all into my music, all my fairy tale dreams and wishes. I believed it was more conceivable that I would grow up to become a rock star than to ever have a stable, healthy, enduring relationship with a man. I had no reason to believe otherwise. My parents' marriage was not a happy or successful one. It was doomed from the beginning. If I used my parents as a template, I had no reason to believe a marriage or a man and a woman or two people could work. I had seen with my own eyes from a young age that love is painful and sad and lonely and messy, and love brings out the worst in people. When my mother gave up her dream of being a concert pianist, she also gave up the man she loved. My mother was in love with a man who wasn't my father all through my parents' marriage, and my father knew it. Mom met Felix when they were both music students at the University of Michigan. They were engaged to be married, but at the last minute, my mother got scared and decided that marrying a musician with no prospects, no security, no guarantee of future employment, and a man of whom her parents did not approve wasn't the smart thing to do, and she broke off the engagement right around the time she switched her major from music to journalism. Soon after that, she met my father, a medical student, and agreed to marry him. They ended up in New England and had 3 kids. Felix went on to play bass in the rock group Mountain, who were known for their early 1970s hit Mississippi Queen and for their rather large Meatloaf-like frontman, Leslie West. Felix also produced other people's records, including Cream's Disraeli Gears. My parents managed to forge a quasi-united front until I was 11, and then they finally split up for good. Felix drifted in and out of my mother's life. I knew, as a child knows everything, that he was often on her mind. He came to visit the house once when I was about 9 years old. Dad must have been out of town at the time. I remember Felix falling asleep on our couch, sitting up in the middle of the day. This is the guy Mom is so hung up on, I thought. After the birth of her third and last child, my younger brother, my mother experienced a terrible spell of postpartum depression. In this agonized, weakened state of mind, all she could think was that she had to get away from her life and my dad and go to Felix. She left the baby and me and my older brother, who was 5, with a neighbor and took off from Boston on the first plane out to Chicago, where she knew Mountain was scheduled to play on a tour stop. Felix was married to someone else by then. Plus, he was on tour and preoccupied with that, so my mother's impulsive, desperate visit was a short one. In the music room of our house, there was a harpsichord that my father had built as a gift for my mother with his bare hands from a harpsichord construction kit. He was always building things, skiffs, tables, desks. His last big project before he died was a small airplane which he was putting together in his garage and which he hoped one day to fly. When my mother returned from Chicago, my father knew where she'd been. She hadn't told him, but he knew. He'd managed to find us kids and gather us up and bring us back home, where he'd waited, fearful that she might not return. When she walked up the brick path and into the house, past my father standing in the doorway, my mother said nothing. My father didn't speak either. He went to the garage, grabbed the axe he used for chopping wood, and started back toward the house. My mother, watching him from the kitchen window, wasn't scared and didn't move or run away, even as she thought, he's going to kill me. She was so depressed that she didn't care. Her next thought after he's going to kill me was, I don't care if he kills me. Dad walked in through the kitchen door and past my mother, holding the axe. He went through the dining room and into the music room, and he brought the axe down hard on the harpsichord, the beautiful harpsichord that he had built for my mother. He destroyed it methodically as my mother watched, numb, and when he was finished, he looked at her with sweat streaming down his face and said, "Stay with me." She did for 8 more years. I naturally concluded that love and men and marriage must always lead inevitably to smashed harpsichords. But music, my loyal and constant companion, would never break my heart or love me too little or destroy anything. Music would be an alternative to secular romantic love and to marriage and misery. The audience and I would love each other from a safe platonic remove, and no one would get hurt. Okay, so now I'm going to move on a few years in my life and just read about a very important moment in my life. Can you still hear me? Okay. So this is about a very important transformative turning point in my young life. It's a chapter called Vision. I came home from school one afternoon during my junior year in high school to an empty house. My mother was at work at the Boston Globe. Dad had moved away after my parents' divorce 5 years earlier. My younger brother was off somewhere, probably at a friend's house, and my older brother was at boot camp in Texas. Actually, I have to say, I wrote that he was in boot camp in Texas, but I recently was corrected by my brother. He was actually at boot camp in South Carolina. So I got that fact wrong. Everything else is completely true, though, in this book. Okay. When all of us were together, the house was often filled with turbulence and fighting and yelling and weighty objects hurtling through the air. So it was always a relief whenever I had the place to myself. I could let out a deep breath and relax. The solitude worked like medicine. I lay down on the white shag rug in the living room, soaking in the delicious quiet and calm. The afternoon sun streamed in onto me through the sliding glass doors that led out to the brick patio. It was a chilly October afternoon. All the leaves outside were starting to turn, yellow, orange, rust, gold. It was almost 3 o'clock when I would turn on the television to General Hospital like I did every day. I lay there on my side, my head on my arm that was extended upward, my mind lazily blank, just enjoying the wonderful warming sun on my back and the silence as dust motes floated down in slow motion in front of my eyes. Suddenly my attention was drawn diagonally toward the far corner of the room, over near the wall where the wood-burning stove stood. I looked and I saw something. It was a vision of me, standing, singing, alone on a big stage in front of an audience partially obscured from me by the light shining on the stage, an audience so vast that its individual members' features and forms were blurred into a nebulous sea of love and happiness. This mass of humanity was singing along as one with me like a rumbling tidal wave, its unified spirit breaking over me, and I was answering them with my perfect, beautiful music. Everything was just as it should be. I wasn't dreaming. This was a waking vision, like a crystal ball telling me some important personal truth. I knew at that moment that I had to pursue music seriously as a calling. It was foreordained. I no longer had any real fear or doubt about it deep down. I'd seen my future across the room, playing like a movie meant for my eyes and no one else's. It was a secret between me and the universe. Now I'm going to move up a little bit to the tour that I write about in the book, which is around, I think it took place around 2002. After I'd had, I've had some ups and downs in my career, and so this is me and my band were playing in a small club in Philadelphia. Gives you a peek into what it's like backstage on a small tour. Okay, so Frida was the drummer. Tim was the tour manager. Heidi was the bass player. Brian was the merch guy, the guy who sold the t-shirts and the CDs. Okay. And we come to this club and done a sound check, and then we went to dinner, and that's where I'm starting. After dinner, we all, for lack of any better ideas, hung out in the dressing room down the stairs below the main floor of the club. Frida practiced drumming beats on her portable practice pad. Tim did some tour manager business on his laptop, and I browsed through Frida's copy of Yoga Journal. Heidi smoked a cigarette. Brian opened a beer and then went upstairs to man the merch stand, and thus we passed the hour and a half until showtime. A few minutes before we were supposed to go on, I suddenly had to pee, pre-performance jitters, but there was no toilet in the basement where we were stuck. The only restroom was up the stairs that led to the stage at the front, then all the way through the crowd and to the back of the club, and then into an adjoining room that housed the bar. And then clear across this room was the one tiny ladies' room that I was sure had a line of women waiting to get in by now, as it was the only toilet in the entire place, which happened to be full of people. I didn't have time to wait in line, and there was no way I was going to hold it for our whole 75-minute set, so I picked up a plastic cup from the hospitality table, and I warned Frida and Heidi, who were the only ones in the room with me by now, that I was going to pee in this cup, so don't look. I found a semi-hidden spot under the stairs and next to some stacked cases of beer, pulled my pants down to my ankles, held the cup under me, and let it out. This maneuver is performed more frequently on tour than the layman might realize. It's true. Often the makeshift backstage areas at these small clubs do not contain their own private bathrooms. Why would they? Why put a toilet in a storage closet? And when you are on the road on the cheap with no commode-equipped tour bus to escape to, and you gotta go, but there's nowhere convenient and nearby to do it, and you have to be on stage in 2 minutes, pissing in a cup is the only practical solution. But sometimes there are complications. Sometimes, like tonight, not only is there no toilet in the room, but there's no sink and there isn't even a wastebasket. So tonight I had no choice but to leave my full cup somewhere in the room when I was done doing my business. I tried to find a place where no one would accidentally knock it over or pick it up and take a sip out of it. The choices seemed to be either way up high on top of a stack of boxes, or down on the floor in an out-of-the-way place like a corner of the room behind the couch. I chose the former. That way, it seemed, at least the cup would be found and discarded and not left to grow rank and moldy in some hidden dark nook. I don't particularly enjoy the fact that cups full of my body fluids are sitting uncovered in various backstage rooms across the country. But what is the alternative? The alternative would be, I guess, to pee on the floor, and I really don't want to do that. That would be rude. That would be rude. If the venue doesn't have an accessible bathroom for the band, the least they could do would be to provide us with entree to a sink with a drain. Or if that isn't possible, a plastic bag-lined trash can or bin for us to dump our waste, liquid or otherwise, would be nice. Besides, what about the banana peels and beer bottle caps and snot-filled napkins, all the other stuff that the bands might need to throw away? What about the used condoms, candy wrappers, cigarette butts, spent syringes, bong water, bullet shell casings? What are we supposed to do with them? And what if somebody had to vomit? Where would she go to do it? Frida wasn't fazed at all when I peed in the cup. She'd seen me do it before. She'd had to resort to it herself a few times, but young Heidi was horrified. I felt bad for her, but like I said, what was I supposed to do? Pee in my pants? Now, I could read one more, or I could stop and answer questions. I mean, do you want to hear one more? I don't know how long I should talk. One more little thing? Okay. It's another one that's kind of a bummer, but I don't know. I just like to tell the truth, you know. It's kind of more interesting to talk about the dark stuff and to write songs about the dark stuff, I think. I don't know, because I think it's because when you hear a song or read something that it kind of expresses your own pain and loneliness, it's sort of comforting. And, you know, I like to recognize myself in other people's music and writing, and I don't want to read about how happy someone is. I mean, I'm fairly happy, but I write about the dark stuff. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it. It's from a chapter called Cool Rock Boys, which I can't find now. I'm sorry. I'll find it. 111. Okay. James was tall and skinny, with big black eyes and a quasi-consumptive pallor, which emphasized the bigness and blackness of his eyes. Even though he wasn't a rock star yet, he looked and carried himself like a rock star, with a dramatic, exaggerated slouch, which made him look as if the mundane tasks of everyday life were a burden to him, like he was too important, too precious to be bothered with things like walking and eating and paying rent and stuff like that. Like he ought to be ministered to, served, fed, carried, chauffeured. James's obvious general physical discomfort and apparent anorexia were, I thought, symptoms of his genius, of the great artist's inner torment. James' band was a cross between the Rolling Stones, the Sex Pistols, Nirvana, Neil Young, and Lynyrd Skynyrd, full of devils and angels and an irresistible swagger. His singing voice, a southern drawl, was alternately plaintive and menacing, going from snarling and sneering to sweet as syrup. That voice drove me crazy. It was sexy music, and so it followed that James, as the composer and guitarist and singer and mastermind behind this sexy sound, was sexy himself. So I let myself respond to his advances. He seemed as determined to be with me mere minutes after meeting me as I was to be with him. But as I jumped in, some instinct, some all-knowing, protective, sensible, recessed part of my psyche told me that it would end badly with James. It was happening too fast. I didn't even really know him. It was dangerous and stupid. James could be so caustic, so negative toward the people around him. I had the sense that he was on his best behavior around me, but I went ahead with it because I was so crazy about his music, and I loved the way he called me baby. I was entranced. I think I wanted some of James's rock and roll mystique to rub off on me, and that's the real reason I wanted to be with him. Part of me wanted to be him, to be a tough, snotty, street smart, tubercular, glamorously skinny, stylish, beautiful, cool, rock and roll boy. And so my desire for him was wrapped up in all that. He represented all the qualities that I thought I lacked as an artist and front woman. Swagger, gravitas, a dark, low, powerful voice that people would take seriously and not slag off as cute or coy or girly or a novelty. I wanted to bask in some of James's rock and roll glow, in the energy that lit fires in his music. I objectified him. I would walk into a restaurant or a club with him beside me, hoping people would notice us, and thinking proudly, look what I got. I thought that being with James, this ultra-cool rock star on the rise, would make me cool by association. That's how confused I was. Looking back, the depth of my shallowness shocks and appalls me. I thought at first that I was falling in love with the guy, but really I was just in love with his sound, with some ineffable spirit in his songs, his voice, his music, his words, his distinctive guitar playing style. All of it was so powerfully evocative as something I couldn't place, something that I felt already existed in the world's collective unconscious and in me before we met, before I was born. Something elemental that he, James, and his music were tapped into. His music pulled me to him like mosquitoes to a primordial swamp. When I left Louisiana after we got together that first time, James asked me to leave him my little half-empty bottle of vanilla oil fragrance when I flew home, to keep some part of me close to him. We kissed at the airport, and James said with urgency and gravity, "I want to come see you soon." And then I flew back to Los Angeles, where I was living. James did come a week or two later, and from that moment on it was official. James was my boyfriend, and I was his girlfriend. On that first visit, I noticed one day when we were sitting on my couch, a grayish scar, a thin mark about an inch long and a centimeter wide in the crook of his left arm. I pointed to it and asked James, "What's that?" He hesitated a second, and then he said, "It's a burn." "Oh," I said, and resumed making out with him. Months later, after the two of us had gotten to know each other better and realized that maybe we weren't so compatible after all, maybe he was a little too rock and roll for me, and I was a little too cautious for him, James confessed that his burn was actually needle track marks. James was a heroin addict, and I hadn't known because he hid it well, and I'd had no reason to suspect that his burn wasn't a burn. It looked, I thought, like it could conceivably have been some kind of a burn scar, like maybe from a flaming twig that landed on his arm as he stoked some fire somewhere, or possibly some kind of a soldering accident. Also, James was temporarily clean when he met me, and he had been abstaining for a few weeks, trying to make a new start away from the drugs. But at some point, when he went back to Louisiana after one of his visits to LA, after the cracks were starting to show in our hastily conceived relationship, he escaped back into getting high. James broke up with me by pretending that I didn't exist anymore. Back in Louisiana, back on heroin full-time, he simply stopped calling and stopped returning my calls. I grew quite frantic and distraught, not to mention confused, before I finally figured out what was happening. James's disappearance and his determined attempt to will me into non-being were his way of ending it. His behavior seemed so cowardly, so immature, so irresponsible, so needlessly cruel, so pathetically weak, so pathologically passive, so fundamentally wrong, and so absolutely inconceivable that it took a couple of weeks, 2 horrible, agonizing weeks of not eating or sleeping much, for me to fully believe that James was really breaking up with me by not calling. It was very hard for my mind to get around the fact that a person could do such a thing. I was disgusted with my James and with myself. How had I, who considered myself reasonably intelligent, been so stupid? How did I get myself entangled with someone who so lacked the character and decency and bare minimum of guts that he was unable to extend the tiniest bit of common courtesy, like a breakup phone call or at least a letter, especially to someone with whom he'd been intimately involved for half a year? This was a person I had chosen to be with, And so that made me an idiot for making such a bad choice. It made me pathetic, immature, irresponsible, wrong, etc. It left me shell-shocked and afraid of what other terrible, harmful decisions I might make in the future. I just want to end it with one little last thing. This chapter is all about how I dated a few rock guys and how it never worked out because I was just drawn to these guys because of something in their music and not necessarily something in them. And so this is just a little ending to that chapter. It was never the guy's fault when it fell apart. It was my fault for falling for the guy who was born with the voice that made my knees weak. The man with the voice that helped to heal my wounded heart could also break it. The man could not help me. Only his music could do that. That was what I finally learned through all that trial and error. I loved rock and roll, and so I loved the rock and rollers. I always wanted to be one of them. I believed that only the God-forsaken or rock-forsaken sound of my voice and my debilitating self-consciousness kept me from being admitted into that mostly boys' club. I yearned for recognition and accomplishment in the rock arena, and I gravitated toward those who possessed or at least deserved what I wanted for myself. But I was misguided, because at heart, I am not a rock and roller. At heart, I'm a librarian, a bird watcher, a transcendentalist, a gardener, a spinster, a monk. I was like a fish out of water in the modern rock world. That was why I was so often discontented and unsure of myself and my place. I was in the wrong environment. That's why it always seemed to me as if something wasn't quite right. I don't want loud noise and fame and scandal and drugs and late nights and flashing lights. I want peace and quiet and order, solitude, privacy, and space for contemplation. I want to awake at dawn and listen to the birds and drink a cup of tea. I need to face facts. None of those cool rock boys, those skinny, pale-skinned beauties you see slouching down the street in their jeans and sunglasses and post-coital must and matted hair, none of them are as cool as they seem to the untrained eye. Of course they won't admit it. But I have seen the truth. They're not cool, I'm not cool. None of us ever was. We are all secretly freaking out. And now, I will take questions.
Juliana, if you could repeat the question back, and also remind
Okay.
people can speak into the void.
Okay.
We're recording the event. We also broadcast on Northeastern changing our YouTube site. So
Okay.
questions we can step up.
Okay. Oh, this guy in the front has one? He doesn't have to walk back to the mic, does
Yeah,
he?
you just repeat.
Okay, I'll repeat it.
Okay. First of all, your very honest and touching presentation is cause for thought and certainly will stay with many of us for a time. Many years ago, the great literary critic Irving Howe was asked why he didn't become a writer, why he became a critic. And he said he wasn't blessed with an unhappy childhood. As I listened to you talking about the very difficult conditions of your upbringing and of the relationship with James, I wonder if ever you ask yourself two questions. One, would you ever like in some way to find a relationship which was meaningful, maybe peaceful in a certain way, collaborative, etc., number one. And number two, if the cost of that were somehow a separation from the music, the core power and passion of your life, would you in any way be attracted to that possibility of communion with another human being?
That's a good question. The question is... No, that's a really good question. I don't know how I'm going to summarize it. Could I ever, and do I want to have a peaceful relationship, which, and am I afraid that a relationship like that would take something away from my art? Is that your question?
That's more or less close enough.
this is something I think about a lot. Because I have mostly been involved with other musicians, specifically frontmen who write and sing and play and do what I do. And all people who do that, or the people who are good at it, are usually insane. And I'm a little bit insane myself, or maybe a lot insane. And so, but people like that are attracted to each other because they understand each other's insanity, but it makes for very volatile relationships. And the problem, I think, another problem is that I'll just call myself an artist, because what I do is some kind of art. I think of myself as an artist. The problem is that creating the art is a very solitary endeavor, an experience. The art demands a lot of time and energy. And so it's definitely a love affair that I have with my music, and the love for that experience of creating the music does compete with the love for a significant other. It's really hard to balance it, and I'll admit I haven't found that balance in my life yet. And I guess maybe, you know, for a lot of my life I was more devoted to the music. It was just something I was more desperate to be making music than I was to be in love or part of a couple, part of a mature relationship. But as I get older, I definitely feel like I would like to experience, you know, mutual, enduring, healthy, mature love. But I'm not sure it's going to happen, given my past experience. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very well.
Okay. We're all insane, selfish bastards, basically, artists. And so it's hard to make a relationship work, I have found. Okay. Next question? Yeah?
I had read somewhere that
Can you use the mic, please, because we're recording?
I have to go up.
Yeah. By the way, you can still become a librarian,
I know. Do I need a degree for that? I mean, I have a college degree, it's a music degree. Do I need to go back to school? Library science? Okay. I'm thinking about it.
So I don't know where I read it, but you did mention that you were...
It's on, but he's tall. Okay.
Your audience, you got really burnt out playing to teenagers, and I had that right, yeah? For a period of time, you got very tired of playing to an audience, just a very young crowd.
I don't know. I think it's more that I just got sort of burned out playing the same places over and over again, the same environment, the small rock clubs.
But I'm curious, what was your fantasy or sort of vision of the type of audience that you saw yourself playing for as a young artist before you really started to get out there? How has that evolved now? What's your sort of idea of audience, respectable audience?
Well, when I was younger, I didn't really think about the type of audience I might find. I just wanted an audience. You know, when you're starting out, you have these rock and roll dreams, and you want to put records out, and you want people to love the records and to come to your shows. And so it was only after I found an audience that I started to contemplate, you know, what makes an audience a good audience or a not so good audience. And I never really came to any conclusions, but as the more time goes by, the more grateful I feel to have an audience at all. And I'm just really, really happy that I ever found an audience, and I'm not. And I think that as time goes on, the audience grows with me, you know, and also now I see a much more diverse audience than I did in the beginning. In the beginning, it was like when I started out as a teenager in my early 20s, the audience was mostly my age, and it was like this college crowd. And now I see college kids and even younger kids, and I see people in their 30s and 40s and older, and I think it's really gratifying to see that my music sort of reaches all kinds of people. But you know, there always, when people get some success, a lot of people seem kind of discontented with something. You know, like Kurt Cobain, what I was talking about, how when Nirvana became popular, the audience was full of, you know, like jocks or whatever, and he didn't like that the jocks were coming to his shows, and he wanted a more intelligent, open-minded crowd. And so I think with massive success comes in a weird way, disillusionment comes with massive success. But I never had huge, massive success, so I never got to the point where I resented my audience. Now I'm just really, really grateful for my audience, that they're there at all. Yeah.
As a writer, you said that writing is like a private thing, and I know for me, when I write, it is a private thing. Do you have trouble making it public?
No. No, I mean, obviously I put a lot of really personal in terms of emotions. I've always been really honest about the emotional truth is always there in my songs and in the book. I try to keep out the details of my particular life, but I think it's always been really important to me to not. It's always been really important to me to tell the truth, because I think that just makes the art speak louder in a way. And no, I'm not really worried about being truthful that way. Are you?
I don't know. I guess as an artist, as you say.
You can say it. It took me a long time to be able to say that word.
No,
Yes, I'm an
I
artist.
like saying it.
You can say it.
And then some people look at me and.
I know, it sounds pretentious, right?
Artiste,
I know.
you know?
Just
Well,
say it with no shame.
Yeah, when I write, it's like very private thing, and I want to share it, but I feel conflicted at the same time.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and it's hard. Like, I know if I want to do this singer-songwriter thing, I have to like promote myself, but like as a person, I don't like to like just throw myself out there all the time. So I'm always like, it's in like limbo mode.
Yeah, that's the problem, that you don't have to promote yourself. I mean, did anyone read the profile of Will Oldham in that recent New Yorker? No? Someone did? Okay, so he's a guy that doesn't really promote himself, except for, he was really conflicted. He talks in the article about how he was really conflicted about even doing the interview with the New Yorker, because he usually doesn't promote himself, and he's done okay for himself. So, but yeah, most people have to promote themselves, and I, like you, have always been very conflicted about it. It's hard, you're always trying to balance the art and the commerce, and it's kind of impossible to do it, because it seems like the art can only be 100% pure if you don't talk about it. In a way, talking about it takes something away from it, I think. So yeah, I'm uncomfortable really explaining what my songs mean. So I just try to put them out there, and because you want the music to have its own power, and you don't want to have to explain it. I don't fully even understand all of my songs, and it's like something apart from us. They're these entities that exist apart from us. And I guess what I'm saying is, I hear you, man. I feel for you. It's a problem that doesn't go away.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have any answers, but I relate to you. Anyone else have a question? Okay.
Do I have to go to the mic, or?
If you can, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
this? All right, okay. Right? Okay. Okay. So how important is it for you to have outlets outside of the music, like your blog and the book, to connect to fans, and specifically the female audience? Because we have a lot of personal, you reveal a lot in your book.
I don't specifically try to speak to girls and women. I'm just trying to, communicate with people. It's great though if I can inspire young girls to maybe, work on their own writing or music, or to pick up a guitar, or to believe in their ideas. But it's great to inspire anyone, male or female. The blog is kind of a new thing for me. I started doing it maybe 6 months ago, and I take for people who don't know, I take a different song each time I write, and I just write about the song, a song of mine, what it means to me, what was happening when I wrote it, and then sometimes I go off on tangents that have nothing to do with the song. But for me, the blog is kind of, it started as a writing exercise, just to keep me writing prose, which was kind of new to me, but it turned into something different. It turned into sort of a support system for me. All the comments that people send to me have been really helpful to me, because I've had a kind of rough few months. I had some health problems and a breakup, and then my dog passed away kind of all at once, and people were just, I wrote about these things in the context of different songs I was explaining, and people just were so sweet to me and so helpful, and so it's become this give and take. It's just really nice for me to have that dialogue with people, and to know that they're out there. And what else did you ask me?
Yeah, the book too. So the book as a tool to reach out to people.
Well, the book, I think the book was just, I just had this desire for so many years to write a book. I think a lot of people have that desire, and it really was just, the goal was to write a book and to complete it and to publish it. And I wrote about myself for lack of any better ideas. And I wanted to talk about some of the things I'd been through. I guess I thought it would be interesting to people, and I wanted to clear up some misconceptions. And it's, when you put out a book, you don't really get so much feedback. It's when you put out an album, you get a lot of feedback at concerts. You get to come and see people relating to you and to your music. But with the book, there's a few readings here and there, and it's hard to really get that feedback. So the blog has been good, and the music is always good for that, for feedback and dialogue.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm a teacher here, and I teach music industry, which probably seems like how can you do that? But
No, it needs to be taught, I think.
Two things. One is I want to make sure that you understand that 2008 was a really shitty year for all of us.
I know that, and I know.
Okay.
I know. Thank
And
you.
the other thing that I want you to know is that I see a lot of really strong, really smart, really cool young women in my classes, and women have always been smarter than us, and we accept
I
that.
know.
We accept it. But I hate to do this because this has been such like a really amazing personal thing. I have to ask you though, and I apologize up front, what do you think about like the whole you have to have a label thing?
You have to have your own label?
No,
What do you
well,
mean?
Whatever. I mean, it used to be that, and because I'm older than you are, and I remember I sort of watched you along the way, and I think it's great that you, and don't take this the wrong way, that you never achieved that like, oh my God, stardom level, because I feel like you have reached this place where you can sustain it for as long as you want. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to get people to think about redefining success on an individual basis. And I just wonder, do you still think that it's like worth worrying about whether or not you get a major label deal?
Well, I think these days it's so much harder to be in competition as a new artist. I mean, when I started out, there were a bunch of major labels and lots of small bands were getting signed, but now, you know, there's just a few labels and they're bigger. Each of the few labels is this huge monstrosity and a huge corporation, and there's just so much pressure now to there's so much more pressure now, I think, for young bands and artists to succeed, that it's really split the mainstream from the, what do you call it, not the underground, but the mainstream and everything else. And that's why so many artists are starting their own labels, because they can't compete in this impossible marketplace anymore. And does that make any sense to anybody? So I think a lot of people like me and like Amy Mann, people who have been doing this for a while and who have been through the major label system and who have worked with indie labels and been through that all and still are still doing good work, a lot of those people like us are starting our own labels, which basically means just putting out our own music and distributing our own music. And I think people have been forced into that position because major labels are less apt to sign new bands these days unless the band is really, really accessible and really, really wants to go for that mainstream success. It's just because it's all about money now, and it's all about the shareholders and the stockholders in the companies, and labels won't sign anything unless it's unless they think it's a sure bet. They won't take chances on people anymore. And so, in conclusion, I just want to say, I don't know where I'm really. I don't have a conclusion, but I used to kind of hate the internet because it seemed like it was taking something away from. Well, it was forcing me to change my life. I had to learn how to use a computer, but now I think that the fact that people are able to distribute their own music with new avenues and new distribution outlets is a good thing, because it does give the artist more freedom and power, and we're seizing the means of production, and because we have to now, I think. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I think we have time for one more question.
Anybody? One more? Okay. Come on.
Hello. In terms of performing, it seems to me the last decade or so, there's this wonderful new kind of world of these neighborhood art centers, converted firehouses, that sort of things that seat 200 or 300 people, and a lot of artists, Roger McGuinn, Maria Moldauer, Jimmy Webb, are starting to perform in those places and not charge $75, and the whole audience is not 17-year-olds, and you get a wide variety of people. It seems to me that, and I enjoy going to those kinds of places, that it's a kind of a whole new series of places where artists can perform. Have you thought about those types of areas?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I know that there are definitely cool venues, and it's good to seek them out, to seek out these alternative places to play. It is, the concert business is such a big business, and it's outrageous how expensive tickets are. I mean, I remember going to see the Replacements for $6 at the Channel, and you can't go to see anyone for $6 anymore. I went to see Madonna, and the ticket cost. I was invited to go with a bunch of girls, and the ticket cost $100, and it was a nosebleed seat, a terrible seat, and I just don't want to go to concerts like that. It's outrageous. But so yes, I fully I support those kinds of venues that are independently run, and I think that the concerts are getting so expensive because no one's buying records anymore. People are downloading stuff for free, and so I think some of that loss of income is going into making the concert ticket prices higher. But you know, it's just also just inflation, and I will always try to keep my concert prices low because I just, you know, I want to do unto others what I want them to do. And to me, I don't want to charge someone even $20 for a ticket. That's too much for a rock club. So yeah, independent venues are good. Thank you for coming. I'll be signing books and CDs out there.